Loot box news from Belgium now, and I know some of you are probably sick to death of hearing. Well, I know for a fact some of you are definitely sick to death of hearing about loot boxes, but I think the phenomenon, at least in the AAA sector, is wrapping up. I've already said as such in a Gymquisition, and stuff like this coming out of Belgium suggests that indeed the honeymoon is over for glorified gambling in mainstream AAA game releases. I mean, I call it glorified gambling. I could use the word that Belgium itself is using at the moment. Gambling. Not glorified gambling, gambling. According to the Belgian Gambling Commission, paid loot boxes are quite literally gambling. The Commission's investigation looked at Overwatch, Star Wars Battlefront 2, FIFA 18 and Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and it's concluded that the loot boxes featured in them, when exchanged for money, constitute as gambling by their definitions. They've also warned that if this continues, if AAA publishers keep pushing this loot box fad and take it too far, they could find themselves in real legal trouble. And how's this for irony? Star Wars Battlefront 2 is in the clear. That's off the hook, because Star Wars Battlefront 2 took the microtransactions out before all this trouble started. So Star Wars Battlefront 2 kick-started a controversy around loot boxes, kick-started the interest of regulators, but thanks to EA's sharp U-turn, their game is actually okay. It would appear that Belgium is being a lot more hardline than Norway was when we last looked at a European country. Norway only found actionable fault with loot boxes that offered items that could be traded, giving them an intrinsic cash value. But it would seem that the BCG ain't having none of it. In fact, the Gambling Commission's director says paid loot boxes aren't an innocent part of video games which present themselves as a game of skill, players get tempted and seduced by them, and no part of the measures on gambling are applied. Thank you to Grandpa Ed on the Jim Sterling Reddit page for the translation. And what Peter said was true. Loot boxes are seductive and tempting by design. That's what they're there for. It's insidious and predatory, and we've talked all about this before. Game publishers should shove themselves up their own arseholes, etc, etc, etc. Now, nothing's being made illegal yet. Fines have been talked about if the situation gets pushed by game publishers. Fines of possibly up to €800,000, according to Minister of Justice Cohen Geens, who would like to discuss this matter with the game industry, presumably before any concrete action occurs. As with the Norway situation, it's going to be interesting to see where publishers go from here. Now, they could change the way monetization works in games specifically for regions. We've seen this happen with Overwatch. China had a problem with the way Overwatch's loot boxes were sold, so they were changed, but just for China. So we could start seeing regional changes to monetization practices depending on what's legal where. And if that's the way it goes, we'll be able to very easily pinpoint which publishers are the shiftiest dicks. They could also just turn monetization off depending on which region the game's released in. We saw how EA could just flip a switch and bye-bye, no more crystals. Or there is that possibility that they'll look at a country, think, fuck it, too much effort to skirt around their gambling laws, we just won't release the game there at all. Which is drastic, but it's not unheard of. Sometimes some game companies will skip a country if it's ruled that it's too much effort and resource to change something, and it won't be worth the returns they get on it. But I think the most likely situation here is that a lot of AAA publishers just aren't bothered with loot boxes now, at least for the time being. I mean, I'd be almost impressed, disgustedly impressed, if Electronic Arts tried to pull another loot box system with any of its major releases this year. If Anthem has glorified gambling systems in it, I'd at least have to credit the sheer fucking nerve. But ultimately, I just don't think it's worth the negative PR for them. Generic microtransactions still rake in inconceivable, almost blasphemous amounts of money. And the loot boxes were just ways to get even more money without that upper limit, without that threshold. Because you can keep just putting crap in them and people will keep spinning the roulette wheel in your shitty little virtual casino. But it's like I've said time and time again, the game companies have nobody to blame but themselves. They're the ones that pushed this hard and they made the world push back. Oh dear, the chickens have come home to roost. Sorry about that, I had a poultry moment. I was gonna say more, but it would be repeating myself, and everybody knows that I love to repeat myself. However, I'll be saying things that I've said about 5 times before now, so I'll just leave it at that. Fuck loot boxes, if I haven't made that clear before. And if you're like, why are you celebrating this? This is censorship, or anything like that, go back and watch older videos where I've talked about my thoughts on regulation. The short story is I never pushed for this, but I did say it was coming if the companies wouldn't sort themselves out. They didn't. This happened. That is what happens. None to blame but them fucking selves.